When Jesus had finished saying all this to the people who were listening, he entered Capernaum. There, a centurion's servant, whom his master valued highly, was sick and about to die. The centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. When they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him, "This man deserves to have you do this, because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue." So Jesus went with them. He was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to say to him, "Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. That is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. But say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, 'Go,' and he goes, and that one, 'Come,' and he comes. I say to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him, and turning to the crowd following him, he said, "I tell you, I have not found such great faith even in Israel." Then the men who had been sent returned to the house and found the servant well. Soon afterward, Jesus went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd went along with him. As he approached the town gate, a dead person was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And a large crowd from the town was with her. When the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said, "Don't cry." Then he went up and touched the bier that were carrying him on, and the bearers stood still. He said, "Young man, I say to you, get up." The dead man sat up and began to talk, and Jesus gave him back to his mother. They were all filled with awe and praised God. "A great prophet has appeared among us," they said. "God has come to help his people." This news about Jesus spread throughout Judea and the surrounding country.
Good morning to everyone. I had a dream last night about today, about preaching, and in my dream, I preached this really long sermon, and when I had finished, I realized that I had preached a whole sermon and never got to the text. So it was like this dream about, I finished the sermon, and then I realized I just stood up there talking about myself the whole time, or some weird ideas I had or whatever, but I never really got to the scripture. And and afterwards I could see on people's faces like this great disappointment. And then I experienced this great shame and disappointment, especially from the leadership. And so I just felt I spent the whole night feeling really bad while I was sleeping, subconsciously, you know. I'll try to get to the text today. Actually, I'll get to it right away. I'll get to the end of it. In Luke chapter 7, the text we just read, in verse 16, this is the end of the story when Jesus raised the son of the woman. "A great prophet has risen among us, and God has visited his people." Does anyone remember what it said in NIV? The last verse there? Help, yeah. Help, care for, literally visit. I want to talk about visiting today. I remember reading a book some years ago by Marilyn McIntyre. It's called "Caring for Words in a Culture of Lies." And she has just this really interesting short section about visiting. She talks about how it's a lost art anymore to honor things like afternoon tea, or what people used to refer to as weekly calls, where you go to someone. The people who are best at that are people like Don Griesing, Dane Tate. They understand the art of the call and the visit. But she says, people hang out together now, but in ways that seem less disposed to the kind of conversation my North Carolina grandfather meant when he invited his friends to come on in and sit a spell, or my Virginia-bred grandmother when she went visiting. Okay? That's what she called it, visiting. She talks about how the word visit has kind of evolved, its definition has evolved, but you can hear there in the word itself a piece of the word for seeing, right? Where we get our word for vision from. It's about seeing. Visit comes through Latin. It's the same in Latin. It's the same in Greek. This word visiting it's based on the word to see. To see into someone. So it's not a casual, oh, I made an appearance or I was there for something. When I visit someone and someone visits me, we're looking into each other. We're seeing. We're present. We're exploring. This is what she talks about here. Visiting, in the oldest sense, is taking time to truly look at and see one another, to settle into each other's presence, to ask each other questions, offer each other stories, reflect together on our common life, share our fears and hopes, and it requires a high level of intention and deliberate space clearing. And she goes on from there. So when in the text, the conclusion of it here is this great glorifying celebration that God has visited us. And like I said, that word, even Luke's use of the Greek word, episkopeo, that has to do with seeing. That's related to the word episkopos, which is where we get our word for elder or overseer, right? How is the word elder described in the text? What does it mean to be an episkopos? It means someone who sees, not just looks over, but looks into. Like, I want to be involved in these people's lives and see into them, to visit them. That's what one of the words for elder comes from. It comes from this word for seeing. So God saw them. He saw into them. And when you have that action, it's evidence of a deep care, a deep looking after, a deep longing to watch over someone out of love. That's what it means for God to visit. That's what they're celebrating. Not that God did like a drive-by miracle, but that he was actually here and he cared and he saw into our pain, our heartache, our brokenness, our need, and he was here. And we felt his presence. We experienced him. That's what these stories are about in Luke chapter 7. Stories of God visiting, coming near, seeing into our pain, our brokenness. The first one we encountered was a familiar story about a centurion, a Gentile, Roman, okay? Not everybody's best friend, but this guy had a heart for God and God's people. In fact, the text says that he even was responsible for constructing the synagogue for the Jewish people in his area to gather and to worship. So he has a deep and profound respect for these people, even a love or a care for these people and for their God. And he hears about Jesus, and he has a servant in verse 2 whom he highly regarded, whom he considered with great honor, the text says. Later on in verse 7, we're going to see the man saying, "For this reason I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you, but just say the word," and what my translation says, "my servant will be healed." that word in Greek is not servant, it's the word for boy. He sees this as his own son. That's how much he loves this servant. And I've heard, although I didn't see the episode, that maybe there is some, in the series The Chosen, they actually noticed this word in the text about son and did something with that in the episode with the centurion and his servant. But he considers this his own flesh and blood. This is my son, my boy. He's not just a servant to me. Jesus looks into the heart of that man. And Jesus, the guy, he understands authority, and he doesn't think he's worthy to even be in the presence of Jesus. Jesus looks at that and he says, I haven't found faith like this in all of Israel. This person understands authority like no other. Understands what God can do like no other. But it's not because this guy was respecting Jesus' authority that he heals his son. It's because of Jesus' love, Jesus' compassion, that he does so. And he sees just how much he loves this boy. And Jesus loves him, the centurion, and the boy, just the same. And so he goes, Jesus says in verse 9, not even in Israel have I found such great faith. In verse 10, when those who had been sent returned to the house, they found the servant in good health. Not just he's getting better now, or he's on his way, in good health. Everything is fully restored. That's how they found this servant. It's an incredible story, an amazing story. And soon after that, Luke says that he went to the city in Nain. We just read this story together too. It's another story about another son. Here the text says this woman, her monogenes, her only begotten son. We're familiar with that language. We know the connection and what that means. It's a term used to describe Jesus. Here, this woman's only begotten has died. And there isn't a great indication of how old the son is, but it's a son. And that's what's important. The centurion had a son, and this woman has a son, and she feels and knows what the centurion was feeling and knowing. Except this time, the boy, unfortunately, has already died. And when Jesus sees her, verse 13, this is so important. Remember what the word visit means. The celebration of the Lord has visited us. This is what Jesus does here in verse 13. When the Lord saw her, this isn't some mechanical mechanism, some product of the eyes sending in information to the brain and just saying, oh, there's a human in front of you. This is seeing into a person. This is entering into her grief, her pain, her brokenness, her emotions. And when Jesus does that, he, in turn, feels deep-seated emotion. He felt compassion for her. And he said, do not weep. This idea of compassion that is the Greek word here, not Jesus isn't saying, but Luke's telling us from a Greek perspective, he's feeling compassion. The word is splankna. It's about your guts. He feels this deep emotion in his guts. And he says, do not weep. And he came and became ritually impure and contacted a corpse, touched the coffin, and the ones carrying it came to a halt. And he said, young man, I say to you, arise. And the man sat up. and he began to speak. And there's this beautiful language of Jesus giving him back to his mother. Do you see that phrase in verse 15? Look at the tenderness, the compassion, the heart that Jesus has. He doesn't just say, "You good? Okay, I got to go. I have something else to do." He knows that this is an important moment. His mother needed something in this moment. And again, I don't know how old he is, if he's 20 or 10 or whatever. But Jesus does something to give him to her. There's touch, there's involvement, there's action here, where he says, "Mother, here is your son. Son, here is your mother." It's a very tender, heartfelt moment. And when everyone saw this, of course, fear gripped them all, and they began glorifying God, saying, "A great prophet has arisen among us." Real quick here, if you like the nerdy stuff, there's some really cool parallels between this and stories about the prophet Elijah. This phrase, the great prophet, what comes to mind when you hear that phrase? Well, there's a lot of great prophets, but one of the greatest ones, if not the greatest, was Elijah, commonly held belief. And Elijah has a story that goes just like this. And in 1 Kings 17, you can read it later, towards the end of the chapter, Elijah stays with a widow, and her son dies, and there's everyone's distraught, and he's wondering, what in the world is God doing? And he performs this miracle for this boy, and the text says that he got up, and Elijah took him and gave him to his mother. Same exact language in Luke 7. Luke is telling us something about Jesus, that however great Elijah was, Jesus is the new Elijah. Some gospel writers like to show how John the Baptist is like a second Elijah and stuff. Well, Luke says, let's push that over to Jesus. Jesus functions as a second Elijah too. It's all very interesting, at least to me. And so these reports concerning him went all out over Judea and in the surrounding district. So God visited his people. I want to close today just by telling you about another book that I was reading lately. This is a book by a guy named Phil Bray, and it's a book about Leviticus, okay? Super interesting. Leviticus on the Butcher's Block. This is a really short book. The reason why it's cool is because this guy he's Australian, and he's a butcher by trade, okay? So he just comes to Leviticus as a butcher and reads the text, maybe the only kind of person that could be interested in Leviticus because of his trade. But he has some really, really fascinating insights as a butcher, and he's also very well read as far as theology and scholarship is concerned about Leviticus, because he loves it, and it's fun to him. In fact, he has a YouTube channel that's called Leviticus is Fun. So you can see what kind of twisted mind this guy has, okay? But he's really awesome. He's a really quirky guy, really, really funny, and really interesting. But he's talking about in Leviticus where often a lot of the sacrifices, there's a portion of it that goes to God. And the fat, which is the most important and like the luxury of the animal, the best part of the animal, as they considered it. And then the kidneys and the liver. The kidneys and the liver. And he shows about the anatomy of these animals and how these are actually located in the very center of the animal. The kidneys and the liver and these strips of fat that cover these internal organs. And he talks about what those things symbolized in that time, in that culture. In our day, we use the word heart a lot. And when we say, my heart is filled with joy, or my heart is filled with pain, or that hurt my heart, or we're not talking about the thing that pumps blood. We're talking about something else, right? That's what we mean by the word heart. Well, in this ancient culture, they use the word liver and they use the word kidneys to say the same thing. So we use the word heart, they use liver and kidneys. In fact, a lot of times in the Old Testament, when the text in your English Bible says, Lord, I cry out to you from my heart, or whatever, most of the time it does not have the word heart there. It will say the word liver in Hebrew or kidneys in Hebrew. But to translate it to you, to make sense to you, so that it's not weird, the English translators will put the word heart there. But just so you know, the liver and the kidneys are to them what heart is to us. It's the place of your deepest emotions. He talks about the liver being incredibly heavy, way heavier than any other organ, and how that was the seat of the most powerful, heaviest emotions that a human can experience. And the kidneys had this same symbolism. The kidneys were also the seat of emotion, of feeling. These are the deepest central parts of an animal, and those are given to God. And he talks about what that symbolizes and what it is that we as offerers are saying to God when we give those things to him. And it's about giving to God the deepest recesses of who we are. Our deepest, heaviest emotions. Things we might even try to hold back from other people. He says it's so important to give those to God because only God knows how to handle them and appreciate them and see them and visit them. This is what this centurion is doing. This is what this woman from Nain is doing. They are taking a risk and saying, God, this is who I am. This is everything. These are my deepest, heaviest emotions. This is the center of my being. And I want you to see it. I want you to know it. And Lord, I pray that you can have compassion on my situation, in the midst of my pain and sorrow. And it's in those places where Jesus enters. And he gives life, and he gives healing, and he gives strength, and he gives comfort. But we can't be afraid to let him in, to let him visit. This is what these texts are about. So I want to encourage us this week to have the faith of the centurion, to have the faith of the widow, to let God see the deepest and heaviest emotions that we're carrying around in our bodies, and to let him know of the pain and the hurt that we have, and see what he will do when you invite him there, when you invite Jesus to visit. Let's stand and sing.